All right, we should be set.
Okay, great. I think we will go ahead as soon as it turns 9 o'clock. All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm sorry for the last minute switch in the date and time. We're trying to keep it as consistent as possible, but we really wanted to make sure that we had our admin team here today with us for this meeting. So I'll go through the agenda really quick. We're going to do a quick update on where we are with enrolling folks and where we are with the choices. We are going to update folks on the metrics that we are watching for staying open or also deciding to shift entirely to a remote platform. We have, as you can imagine, had a lot of questions coming in. So we thought now might be a good time to just have our principals address the top 5 that they've been getting. And then we're going to talk a little bit about creating feedback loops and how we would like to continually monitor how we're doing this year. No matter kind of what platform we're on, just what we're thinking about in terms of making sure that we are continually soliciting feedback and trying to make improvements. So we are going to go ahead and talk a little bit about enrollment first. Sorry, I took out that slide. So as you may or may not know, we sent out a link to opt into one of 2 hybrid options to the families that chose in-person school as well as the hybrid option. And again, we only sent it to the folks who chose in-school and hybrid for a reason, because we are really looking to get our numbers down in school as much as possible. As you know, or maybe you don't know, Pritzker is going to be on, Governor Pritzker is going to be on at 9:30 this morning, updating us on more COVID measures for reducing the spread of what we're seeing as a possible, spike around Illinois. And so we are too also trying to reduce the numbers of students in the building for student and staff safety. So we only sent that hybrid option out to the families who chose in school, because that would then reduce our numbers in school. We know that we had some families choose the hybrid option, even if they had also chosen remote. And we made the choice not to send it to those folks, as that would, again, increase the numbers we thought we would have in school if those families who chose remote then came in for a portion of the week. So we are sorry, we only were able to send it to one group. But of course, now we have learned, look at what we're learning. We've learned that that email and link has actually been sent around to folks in the community. And so folks who got the link have shared it with folks who didn't get the link. And now we're having a little bit of trouble with our data collection and making sure that we have the right information for everyone. I do want to, if I could, just take a moment and say, our staff, our administrative team are working really, really hard to accommodate as many options and schedules as our community needs right now. And it's becoming a little bit complex. And we recognize that folks really want and need that information, and we're trying as hard as we can to get it to you. But obviously, creating class lists and making sure our staffing is appropriate and making sure our staff knows what they are going to be doing. These are all top priorities, and the sooner we can get the most accurate data from the community, the better. And we know that people second guess and maybe think later, oh, I should have marked whatever. We ask our community really, really to think hard and then just put in that selection so that we can have some firm numbers and move ahead with class lists and staffing and things of that nature. So that's where we are with enrollment. After today, the enrollment is kind of locked, so that we, if anyone who doesn't respond to that hybrid option by 5 o'clock today will be enrolled in in-school instruction for 5 days a week, and then we'll go from there to start our staffing. So unless there's any questions on that issue, I'll keep it open just for a second here if there are any questions. I'm going to look and see if I don't see any hands. So we are going to move on to considerations for opening and closing. So I just want to remind everyone that our decision making on this issue starts at the top, at the state level. And the governor decides the Restore Illinois phase that we are currently in. So if that changes at 9:30 today, we'll know. But as of 9:05 right now, we are still in phase 4, and we are operating under the guidance of phase 4. Then underneath that guidance, where it says that we can open schools, we can only do so under the guidance of the Illinois Department of Health, and then its subsidiaries, which for us would be the Lake County Health Department. And there are some metrics that we have been looking at in terms of health that I'm going to have Tracy show, because the state has been broken up into regions. So Tracy's going to go ahead and show us that website right now so that folks can go ahead and monitor in real time as we are.
Okay, so you can see that Illinois has broken each region into 11 regions. We're region number 9, and that includes Lake and McHenry County. So if you haven't visited this dashboard in the past, you can check this dashboard each day, and it will give you totals and updates. And so the two pieces that we've been watching closely are the test positivity 7-day rolling average. And you can see here that we have had 4 days of positivity increases. When this hits a marker where it becomes concerning, that color turns from green to red. We also look at that hospital admission 7-day rolling average. And right now we have five days of hospital admission increases. Again, when that number becomes more problematic, it turns red. When both of these numbers hit a place where this dashboard are both in red, that would be when we would need to make some considerations for more mitigation.
And I do want to say, you know, Lake and McHenry County as Region 9 seems like a very large area, and it is. So we want to emphasize too that we are working with the Lake County Health Department to give us some more metrics just for our own community. And those would be given to us by zip code. And we are in a nice spot here in Lake Bluff that we only have one zip code that we're really watching. There are some bigger districts that are watching multiple zip codes and trying to weight, you know, the percentage of certain zip codes and the effect it would have on their ability to stay open. So again, we're looking at that. We're looking at 3 consecutive days at or above 8% positivity. That would be the absolute threshold for us to say no more, but we would probably as a district be looking more towards the 7% to begin looking at what we need to do differently. And then again, the sustained 7-day increase is when we would see, or 8-day increases would be when we would see that red marker. And then the reduction in hospital surge capacity or ICU capacity. The other metrics that we're really watching, and this is where it gets a little bit difficult because we know that every district is charged with making the best decision for their own community. And so we've had this question a lot. It's like, why is it that all the districts are operating with the same health metrics and that some are making different decisions than others? And here's the reason for that. We may have the same metric in terms of Lake and McHenry County for positivity rates and hospitalizations, but really the true metric that we need to be watching is our ability to stay open and adhere to the guidance that we've received from the Illinois Department of Health and the State Board of Education. One of those being, can we keep a 6-foot distance at all times? That has to do with 2 factors. That's how many students we have in school at a time and how big our classrooms are. Our classrooms are not all the same size. Our children are not all the same size. Their furniture is not all the same size. And so when we consider whether or not we can keep 6 feet distance at all times, which is the guidance, that's one of the things we're looking at. Another thing that we are looking at is that we have received another iteration of the guidance from the Lake County Health Department this week, as late as Wednesday. And essentially what it says is, and we talked about this, I think the last time, that anyone with any symptom of COVID will need to go home. But not only will they need to go home, we will also need to remove people from that classroom where the person was for at least 24 hours, clean and disinfect that classroom and move them to somewhere else. So the thing that we're looking at now is, do we have enough rooms additional rooms, which again depends on how many kids we have with us in school. Do we have enough rooms to implement isolation and cleaning procedures like that for one symptom? So here's a scenario example. So we would have a student, let's say my fifth grade daughter says she has a headache. To the teacher, headache is a symptom of COVID. We ask the nurse to come and do an evaluation. My daughter gets sent home. We ask parents to come quickly because she will need to be isolated and supervised away from other kids. At that same moment, we're going to have to find a new place for that class to go so that we can clean and disinfect that room, preferably after 24 hours. So another facilities limitation that we are trying to deal with. So again, the lower we get our numbers in school, the better. And so I understand that some folks are frustrated with the fact that they weren't given the hybrid option, but the truth of the matter is, in order to implement these guidelines with fidelity and keep everyone safe, we've got to get as few students in the building as possible. Some of the other metrics, just making sure we have an adequate supply of personal protective equipment, and the ability to continue to purchase more. So, some of our items are on back order right now, and we're kind of waiting on pins and needles for those to arrive. We keep getting a pushback on the date. Obviously, everyone's looking for this equipment, so we understand. But our ability to have it and then continue to order is huge because we want to keep everyone safe. And then finally, the other metric that we're kind of watching is our staffing. So we know that we have some staff with their own health and wellness concerns, which would have them working outside of the building or off-site, working remotely. And that impacts how many folks that we can have in the building. We also know that our sub pool is more limited this year than it has been in the past, which was already limited. And the reason for that is that many of our subs are not really comfortable coming into buildings right now for obvious reasons. And the other issue that's come up most recently is that as other districts in Lake County have decided to go completely remote, many of our teachers now have their own child care concerns for their own children who now don't have a place to go and have to do remote learning at home. So we are trying to address all of those things. We're working with the Park District. We are working with our union. We're working with our teachers to try to make sure we can find the best spot for all of our staff. But quite frankly, this is again a very difficult thing to try to do, because as we know, everyone has a different level of thought or a different kind of thought about how this virus should be handled or how it is being handled, how their own personal concern level and their concern for their family. And we have some staff who are really concerned that, they want to make sure that they are safe and they're keeping their families safe at home while we try to do the best thing that we can for our students. So to say it's a complex issue to try to keep going into school at this point is an understatement. Our administrative team is working really hard with our teachers to try to do the things that we need to do to bring kids back, but it is getting very, very challenging. And then finally, perception is part of it too. And I would just again thank the task force. This group is very, very helpful to us in terms of bringing information back to those that you represent and bringing up concerns and feedback at this level. We've received feedback outside of here as well from staff and from community who are concerned at various portions of our plan. And I just want to emphasize that we absolutely know that we will not be able to make everyone happy in this situation. There is no way for us to accommodate all things that people are hoping to see happen in the fall. And we recognize that, and we understand that that's difficult. And I'm sure that we've heard this many, many times from many different organizations throughout this crisis. We are really, really just trying to make the next right decision based on the information that we have at the moment. And with that information changing, as recently as this week with the Lake County Health Department guidance, we are still waiting for some zip code specific metrics for us to look at. Changing demographic information for our staff as their own districts close down. There's just information that continues to change, as well as addressing the complexity of what our community would like in terms of schedules for their children. So with that, are there any questions on this slide? And if we do have the ability to continue to bring students back, I do want to reiterate that it is our obligation to work with the Lake County Health Department through that process. And so the districts, and there are a few of us now that are continuing to stay either open in a hybrid situation or open full in our area, we have asked for a special weekly articulation with the Lake County Health Department just for us, considering that we are bringing students back, and so that we can make timely and safe decisions for our communities through that process. But we will work closely with them to monitor the health and wellness of our organization and make the calls that we need to, given the current information. I don't think I see any hands raised. If anyone wants
Kelly, this is Ann. I had a quick question.
Yep.
If we hit one of these metrics where we would need to close down, and I don't know if you've even thought this far, but would it happen like the next day? Would we say, hey, we've hit these metrics, as of Friday, we're going to be fully remote? Like, would it happen kind of like within a day, or might there be a little bit of like notice?
So I think the goal would, and I have thought this through a lot, we've thought about that. The goal would be to give as much notice as we can. And I think our best opportunity to do that is prior to bringing kids back. If we needed to make a change, we would hopefully be able to do that in advance of bringing kids back into the building. Once we bring kids back in the building, that decision might have to be made quicker. Based on health information that we have of more folks coming to us in the building. So the goal is as much advance notice as we can. However, we've all seen the news. We've seen what's happened with places that have opened. Sometimes those decisions need to be made really quick, and we'll make them when we need to. And I do want to reassure folks, maybe this won't feel reassuring, but I do want to make sure everyone understands. I know we have put a lot of work into our plan at this point of trying to logistically do the right thing for all of our students and families. If we need to shift course, we will shift course, because again, we're trying to do the right thing for all of our students and families. So it is potentially, a difficult situation for families. We understand that. It's a difficult situation for our staff. And we will shift where we need to go depending on the information that we have. That's all I'm able to say at this point.
Lisa, can I say one thing?
Of course.
I just want to say, and I don't know if this is comforting either to anybody that's watching, but, while there's a lot out there about schools and teachers and whatever, the teachers in Lake Bluff are wanting to teach, wanting to be with the kids, and wanting to do what's best for our students. And a lot of the teachers are already planning and just trying to figure out how we can teach the kids best at this point, whether it's in person, at home, whatever. So I just want everybody to know that we are working super hard even now for whatever school's going to look like. And while people are scared, it doesn't take away from the fact that kindergarten teachers are trying to figure out how to help little kindergartners, and middle school teachers are working hard to figure out how to do middle school. And we're working really, really closely with you, and we appreciate that. And that is not happening in a lot of districts. And so we're very fortunate and lucky to have the administrative team that we have that is working so closely with us. And whatever happens, we'll figure it out.
I appreciate that, Michelle, and I couldn't agree more. We have some really amazing educators in this district, and if I can assure the Lake Bluff community of anything, it is that. We have teachers who will absolutely do the right thing for our kids, regardless of what call we have to make. And it will be a good experience regardless. And I know that the spring was frustrating, and we all feel it. We all know that it was frustrating for everyone, but certainly for our students. And so we are working really, really hard to make sure that we have some pieces in place that will make either situation better for our kiddos. So thank you for saying that, Michelle. And I, again, couldn't agree more. All right. So with that, Oh, and I just have one other plea to the community. So as we try to work through this, what can we ask, or what are our asks of the community? One is support with safety protocols right now. And here's how we can do that. With the younger kids especially, please be practicing some of those skills that would require our teachers to get really close and be helping them a lot. So my own kids, I think about tying shoes, I think about zipping up backpacks, or loading backpacks, or unloading backpacks, as we get closer to winter, just practicing getting all that gear on. Those kinds of things will help us to kind of keep that distance, so that everyone's safe. We would ask, as we approach putting information out on self-certification, that it is actually true self-certification, that you're talking with your child every morning about how they're feeling and what their symptoms are. We're trying to build a system where even if you have to keep them home, they will be able to keep pace with us online, and they're not going to miss anything. So the goal is to keep everyone healthy at school, if they're opting to be there, and everyone who's not feeling well at home. Because again, if one symptom comes up to us, we have to send them home anyway. And then certainly practicing safety protocols outside of school. We know that there are some high risk areas right now in the country that are increasing rapidly. And if you can, we just ask that you stay out of those areas if you're planning on having your child back at school with us. And then finally, patience for our team as we move through this, for our administrative team, our teachers, for our, all of our community members that are working hard to make this happen. And now I'm going to hand it over to our principals for their big top 5. And I'm not sure who's starting.
My name's at the top, so I'm happy to go first if you want me to.
You're starting, Mr. Blackman.
All right, then we'll go there. All right, so I think one of the most commonly asked questions that I'm fielding has to do with what in-person facilitated remote learning looks like at school versus what it will look like for those who choose to keep their kids home. And that comes in kind of 3 primary areas. When teachers or when parents have asked, they want to know a bit about what socializing looks like, or what opportunities there will be for their children to interact socially if they choose the in-person option. And the truth of that is there will be very limited opportunities for our students to interact with one another in person. As we've described in task force meetings of the past, students will be wearing masks. Students will be kept socially distanced. In many cases, they will be behind a plexiglass shield. At the middle school, they'll be assigned to classrooms, but the students in those classrooms will not necessarily even be on the same schedule for their asynchronous and synchronous work that they'll be doing. So there's just not a lot of opportunity there. Some of the response I've gotten to that answer has been, yeah, but my student is doing youth sports and they said the same thing before baseball season and it looks very different. I say this, I have a soon-to-be freshman playing baseball, so I know where parents are coming from on that. My answer to that is, what we're telling you is what will be happening, and we're going to be enforcing all of those requirements and regulations that schools are being held accountable for. It will not be a, yeah, but this is what we said and this is what it's going to look like scenario. So I want to be clear about that. One of the other questions related to that is about the opportunity for personal interaction with teachers. If I choose to send my student to facilitated remote learning at the school, will they have more access to teachers? And the answer there is no. In some cases, teachers may be doing the facilitation, but I need to be clear that in that capacity, they're there to help support the synchronous and asynchronous instructions that the kids are engaged in. They're not delivering, in other words, in-person instruction in their specialized content area to students at school. I think that distinction is really important to make. That's not to say that students won't have access to their teachers. They absolutely will, regardless of whether they're at home or at school. They're going to have access to teachers, but that'll be done remotely. That'll be done via Zoom, email. There's a variety of platforms that we can utilize for that. But I want to be clear, there is not an increased opportunity for a student who's going to be at school to have access to his or her teachers.
And
and
Nate,
along those things. Yes.
can I interrupt for 1 second? I think that feels a little bit different in the middle school than it does in elementary too, because the elementary teachers, we're going to try to pair up with grade level teachers as long as we can, you know, barring illness or anything like that. But we don't have that ability at middle school because of the fact that we only have one grade level, content level teacher, right, in each area. So we aren't able to have everyone with that person in person and remote. That's just not how it's going to work. Yeah.
Right. Right. So very, very quickly, when a teacher is doing their synchronous instruction, delivering live instruction via whatever platform we're using at that time, that's when they're going to be not with and in front of students. They will be with students doing facilitated in-person learning when they're not delivering their synchronous instruction. So the other question that I've been getting has to do with kind of the options and when a change could be made. For example, I've had some parents who've reached out and have submitted their preference for at-home remote learning and have asked, can I choose the in-person option? And that's very problematic at this point because we are basing all of our staffing decisions and class assignments on a number that we knew as of, I believe it was July 31st was the deadline for submitting that information. So switching now to an in-person option really makes things difficult for us. So my response to that question has been, at this time, we cannot honor a request to change to an in-person arrangement. But as far as moving out of the in-person facilitated learning, that remains the same. We can honor a request to move from in-person to remote from home at any time. And we know that some students may need to make that transition even after we start. So we recognize that that has to be something that is in place. One of the other questions is, I chose in-person remote learning. I'm considering the hybrid option. I want to clarify the hybrid option because I think that's caused some confusion for people. When we say hybrid, what we mean is 2 days a week of in-person facilitated learning. That could either be Monday or Wednesday, or it could be Tuesday or Thursday. It is not what some other districts have called a hybrid, where a student is coming in and receiving direct instruction from a teacher 2 days a week, and then perhaps doing asynchronous work the rest of the week. So I wanted to clarify that. And the question I got about the hybrid was, could I choose, if that hybrid isn't working, to send my student back for the 5 days as opposed to just 2? And the answer is the same there. We are building staffing and building room assignments around how many students we'll have in the building on a given day. And if we're increasing our overall number, that makes it really hard to plan for, because now we have a moving target in front of us. That may have been more than 5 questions. I apologize, but that's my top 5.
We weren't counting.
Okay, good, thanks.
We were riveted. We weren't counting. There. That was great. Thank you, Mr. Blackmer.
All right, I'll take it from here. So I do believe I have 5, and I've scripted some things out just so I don't forget to hit on some key points. So the first question that I have been receiving some communication from parents is around the idea of class placement. So the questions are sort of along this theme. I'm planning on partnering up with another family to support our children with remote learning. Can you please put our children in the same class? This question may also come along with a specific teacher name that families want their child or children placed in. So I just want to acknowledge that I can see where these requests are coming from, but we are not able to honor these teacher requests at this time, nor are we able to honor the pairing or grouping of students. As Dr. Aliali has said, there are a lot of logistics that are going into creating our class lists as we identify students that are opting in, opting out, hybrid, and really thinking carefully about just placement, student behavior, partnerships, all of those things. So what I can tell you, and I hope that this brings some comfort for those families that have reached out for this or are thinking about it, our grade level teams have always been in a routine of planning really closely, and they meet weekly. As we move towards our remote learning in the fall, this is going to be more important than ever. So teams work together, they get professional development together, they talk about learners across the grade levels. And so this fall, there is still a remaining expectation that teachers at LBES continue to work closely for planning and instruction this year. Students who are working remote will have the same expectations and schedule no matter what teacher they're paired with. So we spoke at the last task force meeting about reframing our thinking in some scenarios. So as opposed to like the loss of something, you're really gaining more teachers this year. We recognize that the relationships are key. And so students will still have a grade level teacher, but we want to reframe that as this is a point person for parent communication. It's a person or teacher that will work hard to develop relationships and learn about strengths, needs, and interests of the children in their class. So I just wanted to make that clear. The next question is along the lines of some things that Mr. Blackmer talked about. So if I select in-person learning, will there be a teacher in the room, and will that be a grade level teacher? So we are still finalizing lists. I want to recognize that our goal is to have grade level teachers facilitating in these classrooms of the grade level that they teach. And I appreciate Dr. Lally pointing out that we do have the ability here, if we're putting a third grade teacher in an in-person learning environment with third grade students, that there may be some layers of instruction that are happening. So we need our teaching assistants and our specialists supporting other learners or learners in a variety of ways. And so if we need to use them, we may pull, but the goal is really grade level teachers in grade level classrooms. I think it's important to note that as our needs evolve over time, we're going to strive for consistency, but there may need to be changes that are made. Question number 3. If I indicated interest in the hybrid model, why didn't I get another form? So this has been addressed already, but I think again, it's worth pointing out the hybrid survey was sent to families who indicated in person on the initial opt-in, opt-out form. The goal in offering hybrid is to reduce the number of students in our classrooms on a given day to ensure safety and distancing. Question 4. I ordered a supply kit and I elected for my child to work remotely, or I've opted out. Will I get a refund, or how do I get my kit? Our supply kits are on the way, and we are coordinating what we're sort of identifying as a materials exchange schedule or process for this year. So if you purchase a supply kit for your child or student, once they arrive, we'll sort them out to put them in the classrooms of our in-person learners, and we will sort out the remote or at-home family kits so that you can pick them up safely. More communication about this distribution will be sent out soon. The last question that I have heard received emails or talked with parents about is really specific to kindergarten. So I am the parent of a kindergartner, and I haven't received any information about screening. I just want to let our kindergarten parents know that at this point in another school year, you would have gotten more information about this. We're still working on coordinating our screening process. I think it's important that you know that there is the potential that some or all of our kindergartners will not be starting school on day 1, like our 1st through 5th graders. Our screening last year pushed back the start date for our kindergartners to allow us to get to know our learners, and there's a possibility that that may occur this year. We understand that you need to plan your lives, and you need to know when your child is coming to school and when they're responsible for logging on to remote learning. We have email lists of families who are registered, and so you will get communication soon. We want to make our youngest learners' experiences within LBES this fall as comforting and nurturing as ever. So one reason I've thought about forgoing the screening process just to get our students in the learning environments, but the screening does help us with a couple of things. It supports initial interactions with our kindergarten teachers and our specialists, and it also helps us get to know our youngest learners as little people, who they are from an initial interaction. So if we move forward with the screening, our goal would be that we have in-person and remote opportunities to get to know students. So more to come on that, and as quickly as possible. I do understand the sense of urgency there. Those are my top 5 right now. Thank you. I hope I addressed some things that you may have been wondering, or that community members or other parents have been talking with you about.
And I'm sure there might be questions. I do want to say really quickly, one of my colleagues, superintendent colleagues, tweeted out something the other day about the idea that what we're trying to do right now is build a school year in a time frame that we would have normally taken 3 times that amount of time in the spring to do, so that we were ready to go about a month ago. So right now we're still doing what we would have been doing in the spring. And to Kelly's point, all this information would be out and we would be rolling into our institute days with confidence. And unfortunately, that's just not the case right now. And we are again trying to go in a direction that is going to help our community and our students in a way that we think is safe and effective. And we need your cooperation and patience with that as we work through some of these pieces. We also would ask too that, especially if you're on this task force, if you're on, we have a lot of teacher leadership teams that have been working with the principals, to please review the documentation that we have put out so that you know really clearly what the plan is and can answer questions. There's a lot of information that's been put out in the blended learning plan. We have a parent FAQ that was just updated on August 4th, and all of the updates are indicated in red. That's still on our website. If people have questions, refer them to these videos. I know I had an email this morning, like there's a lot of communication, but I don't have time to go through all the communication. I understand, and I get that, but we're not sure which communication, certain people need at times. So it's really important that people make use of the information that we have put out, or at least talk to somebody on these teams to get their questions answered. And yes, sometimes the answer is we're still working on it, and we're sorry about that, but that's the reality of it. And we have to be honest about where we are in the process. Are there any questions on what was presented on the top 5? Okay. All right, so here's the feedback that we need from you today. So regardless of how students experience learning this year, we really want to make sure that we are continually surveying or gathering information from various folks as to how things are going, because obviously this year is going to feel a little bit like last year in the spring in terms of our ability to connect with folks. And the amount of places we're in and the amount of different platforms we're going to be working off of sometimes becomes prohibitive to create those relationships and get the information we need so that we can keep improving. So I want to talk about some of the feedback loops that we've been talking about as an admin team, and then I want to open it up to the group to see what other pieces should we be looking at. So first and foremost, aside from kind of gathering the demographic information of where people would like to be this year, next is the emotional health and wellness of our students and staff, and this is of utmost importance to us, as we know how anxiety producing this whole situation has been all the way since March. And so we have an SEL committee that's met a few times. We have some partners that we're working with in the community that we will be frequently asking students to participate in wellness checks. They're very simple questions that we'll be asking our kids every day, regardless of if they're at school with us or at home. Just giving us some information, number one, to track trends with individual students and how they're feeling so that we can check in if things aren't working for them, but also to track trends over time in certain populations, either in school or at home or at certain grade levels, so that we can address those needs at a tier 1 level. At a core level, if we're seeing a trend in a certain group, we want to be proactive with that and address it as quickly as we can. So that's one area. Obviously, looking at instruction and assessment. So we have universal screeners that we've done in the past. We have a new tech manager that is working with us to figure out how we can implement some of those screeners remotely, either for the students that are at home or in a situation that we are in the classroom. I can tell you we probably won't be starting to administer universal assessments until at least 3 or 4 weeks into the school year because of the logistics of getting back to school and some of the routines and procedures. Kids haven't been with us or engaging in learning for a long time. So it will take us a while to get up to speed and get us to a point where we feel like when the student engages with the assessment, we're actually getting valid and reliable data. So for example, for a MAP test, if we have, you know, a good number of students taking the MAP test at home, we're going to have to provide some information to parents about how to proctor that test on the computer, how to create a quiet place, you know, and make sure that we try to get as reliable data as we can. For my own son took his first AP exam in the spring, and it was, you know, a lot of information to parents about how do you set the student up for success in that kind of environment. So we'll be looking to do that. Some of the assessments, we may be asking even students who are working at home to come into school with us in a small group situation. With our young learners, we want to hear them reading. You know, we want to have that engagement so that we can really do a running record and hear the miscues and gather the information we need so that we can differentiate. So we're working on an instruction and assessment schedule that will include some of our universal screeners, but then some new ways of assessing formatively so that we can get the information we need to differentiate. We also would like, and so with that, that's a feedback loop, right, for us in terms of how the students are doing. Another one is communication. So we want to be asking, not sure how often, but asking whether or not our communication is really helpful. You know, they're just like I talked about, sometimes there's a lack of communication that people feel. Sometimes there's too much communication, too often, not often enough. So just trying to create a quick check-in every once in a while to see if our communication is hitting the right note, if parents and kids are getting the information they need. And then finally, with our students learning in many different places, the other piece that we think we will need to talk about is whether or not they have the resources, either the technology or the materials that they need in order to be successful. So these are some of the areas that we feel like quick surveys every couple of weeks with just a couple of questions would give us a temperature check on how we're doing and what people might need so that we can address those issues. But I do want to open it up to this group. What are the other things that you feel like we should be asking about in order to make sure that our programming is effective this year? And for our teachers, you might want to think about what were your questions that you were asked most from parents in the spring. You know, I think of one thing that we didn't include on this list might be, you know, how much time is a student engaging in learning every day if they're not with us? Because I know on our survey in the spring, we got some feedback that sometimes kids were moving through the material very quickly, you know, to see if our schedule is kind of pacing them out a little better. So I'm thinking maybe time would be something.
I was thinking of one thing that you kind of alluded to is just checking back with the parents on how well they understand the platforms that we're using and maybe like a check-in, what's working well, what's not. I know you can't change an entire curriculum based on the feedback, but maybe like parent education nights where we could learn more about how the kids can use it and then how we can check their work and how we can see their progress as well.
Thank you. That's great. Given lots of wait time this morning. It's Friday morning. Do we think we need to check in on social emotional wellness or health of our parents who are working with our kids? And kind of to Carrie's point, other resources that they might need to support their families during a time when they're together so much. I don't know if anyone else had this issue in their house, but my family got very close in the spring, and sometimes we were a little too close.
Yeah, this is Laura Pease. I think that's a good idea. One concern that I hear shared among parents too is this concern about, will my kids fall behind? So maybe a reassurance of, hey, we're kind of all in this together, and we know that when things hopefully normalize at some point, that there'll be some quote unquote kind of catch up curriculum that way. But don't get too stressed out, stress your kids out if you feel like it's not going at the pace your other children did in those same grades.
I think that's a great point. I have also heard that, and it's a difficult one because I think we all know that this is not normal, but we also know that every district is struggling with this, every student, and to try to reinvent how we do school is certainly a challenge. And yeah, when things get back to normal, it'll be something we'll need to address and make sure that we close those gaps. But that'll be something we'll be working on this year as well. So thank you for that.
I'd like to jump in there as well. And thank you, Laura, because it's a really great point. And I think as an administrative team, we've talked about kind of rolling out a goal one of being checking on the health and safety of our students at the beginning of the year, also their social emotional health and well-being. And then getting to the assessment and curriculum piece after we know that the health and safety and their social emotional well-being have been addressed. And so it will be a slightly slower rollout to the academic instruction. We want to assess kids. We want to see where they're at. And then we want to look at our data to look at what we've been calling kind of COVID impact. So what have been the impacts on all students because of the time spent remotely in the spring. And then we know there's always a little bit of summer slide. And so what are all students experiencing because of those two things? And then are there other students who are being even more greatly impacted because of underlying learning needs or special education needs? So those are things that our teams will definitely be looking at and communicating about after we address those first two goals of the health and safety and social emotional wellness of our students.
Thank you, Tracy.
I'd like to just piggyback off that too. And as parents are now going to embark upon, being the responsibility of handling some of that learning at home, a lot of time is spent in the beginning of the year of just teaching basic routines and getting kids set up. And there's, going to be some time that's needed for training and establishing kind of routines, because this is going to be new norms, new routines for everybody as we work off different platforms here with the remote and in-person and hybrid. So I just want to make sure the expectation is clear that, first things first, we're going to get into a groove, and then, go slow to go fast is, I think, a common saying during these times.
Anything else on this?
I think we brought this up before, but just that, and it's probably threads through all of these feedback loops, but just that idea of equity, like I think, and that's what Tracy was getting at. I was so glad to hear that, but just thinking about like equity of resources, making sure everyone is able to understand the communication, like that can be interpreted or translated, and just all that good stuff. And if there is assessment at home, that everyone has equal access to understanding how the assessment should go and things like that.
Thank you so much. Absolutely. Okay, so as you know, we are going to have to shift the time and days of this task force. I've received some emails from some of you about whether or not you'd like to continue. Some have asked if we do it in the morning and you're a teacher, you might not be able to participate. So we're going to keep working on a time, but this won't start. The new time won't start until after school begins. So we won't implement that time change. We'll try to stick with the Thursdays at 1 until then, and then move to a different time. So we'll try to come up with something that we think will work for everybody. If it doesn't, just let us know and we'll find some other folks. And I think before we end, I think to reiterate, I want to thank everybody in the community for the kind welcome messages that I've gotten. I can't tell you how many of those from community and staff that I have received in such a challenging time. And it tells me a lot about kind of what I already knew about Lake Bluff, but about the resilience during such a difficult time and the still wanting to bring the community together and still keep that ethos of being a welcoming, kind, warm, community-centered place where we think about all people and even during the most challenging times. So I just appreciate it very much. I know that this is difficult, and I appreciate us kind of pulling together to support each other. As Michelle stated, our union is pulling together and doing some great work already, thinking about how we can adjust this year and do better than we have in the past. And as I'm sure they do every year, and always looking to continuously improve. So I'm just very, very proud and happy to be here. I'm very proud of our administrative team that's been working pretty much day and night to figure out the logistics on this and to make sure we do the right thing. So again, please make sure you ask people to review the resources that we have. We have a board meeting next Thursday, the 13th. It will be in the evening. So make sure you let people know that they can tune in. It'll be a hybrid meeting at this point. We'll have some people in person and some people remote. So we're working out the tech on that. And we will have an update to the Return to Learn plan at that point as well. So unless there are any other questions, I'm going to give you 9 minutes back because you changed the time today for me.
Just one quick one. This is Laura. I think last week there was a percentage reference. My husband passed it on to me that about 35% had opted for fully remote. Do you guys have a numbers update, kind of where it all ended up?
So it depends on the grade. It's anywhere from probably 30 to 50% of students opting into the remote at home. But now the numbers are a little bit skewed and still coming in today. Today's the last day to submit the hybrid preference. So we're still in that area of probably 30 to 50%, depending on the grade.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Sure. And again, like I said, the kind of twist that came at us this week that we're still seeking clarification on is just to make sure that we have enough empty rooms. You know, obviously we want to keep kids at 6 feet, but also the empty rooms now at this point for the 1 symptom report and needing to kind of move classes and disinfect and clean at that point. So there's just a lot of logistics we're still working through. All right, folks, thank you so much. Happy Friday. Reach out with anything. It's good to see you all, and I hope you all have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, thanks.